"Please, make it quick," she whispered. The rancher paid her $1. Then did the unthinkable. The sun had already climbed high into the sky, and the heat pressed down on her like a heavy blanket. Her shoes were worn, her dress faded from weeks of washing and sun, but she kept moving forward. She had no choice. The debts had piled up, her small apartment was overdue for rent, and the little savings she had were gone. She needed help, and the Miller Ranch seemed like the only place that could offer her a chance. She remembered the stories she had heard about Rancher Miller. He was a man of few words, respected and feared in equal measure by the townsfolk. Some said he was generous to those who proved themselves. Others whispered that he could be cold and unpredictable. Clara had no way of knowing what kind of man he really was. She only knew she had to try. When she finally reached the main gate, she paused for a moment to catch her breath. The ranch stretched out before her, vast and sunbaked with wide pastures, a few scattered barns, and the faint outline of horses grazing in the distance. The wooden fence creaked in the wind, and the scent of hay and earth filled the air. Clara felt a mixture of awe and anxiety. This place was beautiful, but it was also intimidating, and she wasn't sure if she belonged here. She walked up to the office near the entrance, where the ranch hands usually reported in the mornings. The door was slightly ajar, and she could hear the faint sound of a typewriter clicking inside. Gathering her courage, she pushed the door open. "Hello," she called softly. The room was small and smelled faintly of leather and paper. Behind a large wooden desk sat a man with broad shoulders, gray-streaked hair, and eyes that seemed to study everything at once. This was Miller. He looked up, his gaze sharp but not unkind. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice calm but firm. Clara swallowed hard. "My name is Clara," she said. I need work, anything at all. I'm willing to do whatever you need, and she hesitated, the words catching in her throat. "I don't have much money." "I just please make it quick." Miller's eyes lingered on her for a long moment. He didn't smile, but there was a faint glimmer of curiosity in his expression. "Make it quick, huh?" he said slowly. "That's a strange way to ask for help." Clara nodded, her hands twisting nervously in front of her. I just don't have time. I can't wait. I need work now." Miller leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. He seemed to consider her for a long time, and Clara felt like every second stretched into an eternity. Finally he spoke. "I can give you a job, but I'll pay you $1 up front." Clara's eyes widened. $1. She had expected a full day's wage, maybe more, but this was hardly anything. "Just $1?" she asked, trying to hide her disappointment. Miller nodded. "It's a test. If you prove yourself, I'll pay you properly. But first, I need to see if you're willing to do what's asked of you without complaint." "Are you willing?" Clara thought about walking away. She could feel the sting of humiliation at being offered so little. But she also knew that she had no other options. Every other place she had approached had turned her away, citing experience, availability, or simply the fact that she didn't fit in. $1, she reminded herself, was still a chance. I'll do it," she said finally, her voice steady despite the nervous flutter in her stomach. Miller's eyes narrowed slightly, as if he were testing her resolve. "Good. Come back here in an hour. There will be a task waiting for you. Don't be late. And remember, $1 up front, nothing more." Clara nodded again and turned to leave, but she paused at the door. "Sir, thank you," she said quietly. Miller gave a slight nod but said nothing. Clara stepped outside, the heat immediately pressing down on her again. She took a deep breath, trying to calm the nervous energy that coursed through her. This 1 hour would decide whether she could finally get a foothold in a life that had been so unkind to her. As she walked along the path that led to a nearby bench, she noticed the ranch hands moving about their chores. Some were tending to the horses, brushing their coats and feeding them. Others were fixing fences or carrying hay bales. They all glanced at her briefly, curiosity evident in their eyes, but no one spoke. She felt both out of place and strangely hopeful. If she could just make it through this first task, perhaps she could earn a place here, and maybe, just maybe, she could start to rebuild her life. Clara sat down on the bench, pulling her hands over her knees. She tried to visualize what the task might be. Would it be something simple, like cleaning or feeding the animals? Or would it be something harder, something that would test her limits? The uncertainty gnawed at her, but she reminded herself that she had faced challenges before. She had survived tough days and long nights. She could survive this too. When the hour passed, she returned to the office where Miller was already waiting. He handed her a small clipboard with instructions. "Follow these carefully," he said. "You'll need to complete the task by sundown. Do it right and we'll talk about proper pay afterward. Do it poorly and you'll walk away with only the $1." Clara took the clipboard, her hands trembling slightly. She read the instructions carefully. It was harder than she expected, requiring both physical effort and attention to detail. But she didn't hesitate. She nodded and said, "I'll get it done." Miller studied her for a moment, then gestured toward the gate. "Go ahead, don't waste time." She stepped out, feeling a surge of determination. The sun was lower now, casting long shadows across the pastures. Clara rolled up her sleeves and began the task, moving from one section of the ranch to another. Every step was exhausting, but she pushed herself, driven by the need to prove that she was capable. Hours passed. Sweat ran down her back. Her hands were blistered from the hard work, but she kept going. Occasionally, she would glance back at the office, where Miller watched from a distance, his expression unreadable. That in itself was nerve-wracking. She never knew if she was doing enough or if she was making mistakes he would notice. By late afternoon, the task was nearly complete. Clara's muscles ached, and she could feel fatigue pressing on her like a heavy weight, but there was also a sense of pride rising within her. She had done her best. She had faced the test without complaint, without quitting, and without excuses. Finally, she returned to the office, where Miller was waiting. She handed him the completed work, trying to mask her exhaustion with a polite smile. Miller inspected everything carefully, his gaze sharp and calculating. He didn't say anything for a long moment, which made Clara's stomach twist with anxiety. Then finally he looked up at her. "Not bad," he said simply. "You did what I asked." "That takes effort and determination." Clara exhaled, relief flooding her body. She had survived the first test. Miller reached into his desk and pulled out a crisp bill, more than the $1 she had been paid initially. He handed it to her with a slight nod. "This is for your work today, you've earned it, and there's more work if you're willing to continue. Are you?" Clara felt a warmth in her chest that she hadn't felt in weeks. She nodded, almost unable to speak. "Yes, I'll do it." Miller leaned back in his chair, studying her with a careful, measured gaze. Clara realized that this was just the beginning. The ranch was vast, the work demanding, and Miller unpredictable. But for the first time in a long while, she felt a spark of hope. Maybe, just maybe, she had found a place where she could not only survive but also prove her worth. And as the sun dipped lower on the horizon, casting golden light across the ranch, Clara understood that her journey was only beginning. She had faced the first challenge and emerged stronger, and she was determined to face whatever came next, no matter how difficult or unthinkable it might seem. Clara woke early the next morning, the faint light of dawn spilling through the thin curtains of her small rented room. Her muscles ached from the previous day's work, but instead of discouraging her, the soreness reminded her that she had proven something important. She could handle the work and the challenge. Today, Miller had promised another task, and she was determined to complete it, no matter how difficult it might be. By the time she reached the ranch, the morning air was crisp and filled with the scents of earth and hay. The ranch was already alive with activity. Horses were being led to the pastures, cows mooed in the distance, and a few ranch hands moved about, carrying buckets of feed or fixing fences. Clara felt a mixture of nervousness and excitement. She had begun to see the rhythm of the ranch, and although it was tiring work, it also felt alive and purposeful. Miller was waiting near the barn, arms crossed, eyes observing her as she approached. He didn't smile, but there was a subtle acknowledgement in his gaze. "You're on time," he said. "Good, today's task is different. You'll need focus, patience, and care." Clara nodded. "I'm ready," she said, gripping the clipboard he handed her. Miller's instructions were simple in words but complex in action. She was to take care of a section of the ranch that had been neglected for weeks. The fences were broken, the soil dry, and the small vegetable patch he kept for personal use was overrun with weeds. At first glance, it seemed like a menial task, but as Clara studied it, she realized that it would test both her endurance and attention to detail. She would need to repair fences, remove debris, tend to the plants, and ensure that the small irrigation system worked properly. She started with the fences. The wooden posts were weathered, some leaning dangerously to one side. Clara worked methodically, lifting posts, hammering nails, and straightening boards. Her arms burned with effort, but she kept going. Every time she felt tired, she reminded herself that this was more than just physical labor. It was a chance to show Miller that she was reliable and capable. As she worked, she began to notice more details about the ranch. Small birds flitted among the fences, and rabbits darted across the fields. The air smelled fresh after the light morning dew, and for a moment she felt a strange sense of peace amidst the hard work. Clara realized that she had rarely spent time appreciating the natural world. Here, every detail mattered, every task had a purpose, and there was a rhythm to life that was both demanding and rewarding. After several hours, she moved to the vegetable patch. The weeds were thick and stubborn, and the soil was cracked from lack of care. Clara knelt down and began pulling the weeds one by one. It was slow and tedious, but she refused to rush. Each plant that remained undisturbed seemed to thank her, and gradually she began to see progress. Tiny green shoots peeked through the earth, and the patch slowly started to resemble something that could bear food again. Midday arrived, and the sun beat down fiercely. Clara paused for a moment under the shade of a tree, sipping water from her bottle. Her clothes were damp with sweat, her hands rough from handling tools and pulling weeds, but she felt a quiet satisfaction. She had completed half of the task already, and the results were visible. Yet there was still much to do, and she knew that Miller would expect her to finish everything by the end of the day. As she worked, she began noticing other ranch hands watching her from a distance. Some nodded in approval, while others remained silent. She guessed they were curious about the new girl who had appeared seemingly out of nowhere, tackling a difficult job with determination. She felt a small surge of pride. It was one thing to earn Miller's approval, but it felt different to earn the quiet acknowledgement of people who had worked here for years. Around mid-afternoon, Clara reached the irrigation system. It was old and fragile, with pipes that leaked and valves that barely worked. She studied the system carefully, remembering what Miller had said about focus and patience. She adjusted valves, cleared clogs, and redirected water to the most needy plants. Each adjustment required precision, and she had to learn quickly how much water each section needed. One wrong move could ruin the soil or wash away the tender seedlings. Time seemed to stretch as she worked. Her arms ached, her back stiffened, and the sun's heat made her feel lightheaded at times. Yet she refused to stop. She reminded herself that this task was not just about labor. It was about proving that she could handle responsibility, pay attention to detail, and follow instructions perfectly. She imagined Miller watching her, evaluating every movement, and it pushed her to work harder. By late afternoon, the sun had begun its slow descent, casting long shadows across the fields. Clara took a step back and surveyed her work. The fences were sturdy, the vegetable patch neat and thriving, and the irrigation system running smoothly. She could hardly believe that she had accomplished so much in one day. Fatigue weighed heavily on her, but there was also a deep sense of pride and achievement that made her chest swell with satisfaction. As she prepared to return to Miller, she noticed something unusual. Near the edge of the pasture, partially hidden by tall grass, she spotted a small wooden crate. Curious, she walked over and peeked inside. To her surprise, it contained a few old tools and some letters that seemed personal. She recognized Miller's handwriting on the envelopes. For a moment, she considered leaving them alone. They didn't belong to her, but curiosity got the better of her. She carefully examined the contents, realizing they told a story of Miller's past struggles and personal losses. It was clear he had endured hardship long before Clara had arrived on the ranch. She replaced the crate as she found it, a new sense of understanding settling in her chest. Miller was more than the stern, demanding rancher she had met. He was a man who had faced challenges, taken risks, and endured disappointment. Perhaps that was why he tested newcomers so carefully. He understood the weight of hard work, the cost of failure, and the value of determination. When she returned to the office, Miller was waiting, his expression unreadable. "You're back," he said simply. Clara handed him the clipboard and explained briefly what she had done, from repairing fences to tending the vegetable patch and fixing the irrigation system. Miller nodded slowly, his eyes scanning the details she had recorded. "You worked hard," he said. "I can see that. You're thorough and you didn't give up even when it got tough. That's what matters here." Clara felt a mixture of relief and pride. She had not only completed the task but had also begun to understand the ranch itself and the man who ran it. It was more than work. It was a lesson in patience, resilience, and careful observation. Miller reached into his desk again and handed Clara a few more bills, more than she had expected. "This is for today. You've earned it," he said. Then, in a slightly quieter voice, he added, "There's more work tomorrow. I'll expect the same dedication. Can I count on you?" Clara nodded, her fatigue momentarily forgotten. "Yes, you can count on me." As she left the office and walked toward the fields where she would rest for the evening, Clara reflected on the day's experiences. She had faced physical challenges, learned new skills, and begun to understand the complex character of Miller. She realized that this work was about more than earning money. It was about growth, trust, and proving to herself that she could rise to the challenge, no matter how difficult it seemed. The sun was setting now, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. Clara paused, taking a deep breath and feeling the cool evening air on her face. She thought about the path that had brought her here, from struggles in her small apartment to the demanding life of the ranch. She thought about the lessons she had learned in just one day, the importance of patience, attention to detail, and endurance, and she knew that the journey was only beginning. As darkness settled over the ranch, Clara sat quietly under a tree, letting the sounds of the evening calm her. She was exhausted but also invigorated. Tomorrow would bring new tasks, new challenges, and perhaps more surprises. She understood that this was not just a job. It was an opportunity to prove herself, to grow, and to discover strength she didn't know she possessed. And as the stars began to twinkle in the night sky, Clara felt a quiet determination. She would face whatever came next, with the same courage and focus she had shown today. The ranch was no longer just a place of work. It was becoming a place of growth, a place where she could build not just a living, but a life worth striving for. The next morning, Clara woke with a mixture of excitement and anxiety. The ranch had begun to feel like a place she belonged, yet there was also an unspoken tension in the air. She had proven herself in the first 2 days, but she knew Miller was a man who expected more than just effort. He expected understanding, observation, and judgment. Today, she sensed, would be different. As she stepped out onto the dusty road leading to the main barn, the sun was already climbing, painting the horizon in shades of orange and gold. Ranch hands were moving briskly, some carrying buckets of feed, others tending to the horses. Clara noticed Miller standing near the edge of the pasture, his posture as rigid as ever, his gaze focused and calculating. "You're on time," he said without preamble. "Good. Today you'll work in the northern pastures. There are a few things that need fixing, but I also want you to observe carefully. Pay attention to every detail. You might notice things others don't." Clara nodded, gripping the clipboard he handed her. There was a sense of importance in his tone that made her heart beat faster. Observation was something she could do. She had always noticed things others overlooked, but she also knew it required patience and focus. The northern pastures were vast, stretching far beyond the main fields she had worked in before. The grass was taller here, uneven, and the fences had suffered more from neglect. As she walked along the boundary lines, she carefully inspected each fence post, each gate, and even the water troughs for the animals. Her eyes caught small details: a post slightly tilted, a hinge rusting, a patch of soil where the ground was too soft for the livestock to stand safely. As she worked, her thoughts wandered to Miller himself. He was strict, yes, but there was something more beneath the surface. He didn't speak much, but when he did, his words carried weight. Clara realized that he was not a man to be underestimated. His ranch was large, and yet he knew every inch of it. Every detail mattered to him, and he expected the same careful attention from anyone who worked there. Hours passed, and the work grew harder. Some sections of the pasture had been damaged by recent storms, with fallen branches and uneven ground. Clara lifted, cleared, and repaired what she could, her muscles straining, her hands raw and scratched. Yet she persisted, refusing to let fatigue or frustration slow her down. She reminded herself that every task completed with care would show Miller her dedication. It was during one of these moments, as she was checking a gate hinge, that she noticed something unusual. Near the edge of the pasture, partially hidden by tall grass and a cluster of shrubs, there was a small, weathered shed she had never seen before. The door was slightly ajar, and faint sounds of movement came from inside. Curiosity piqued, Clara approached carefully. She had no intention of intruding, but she couldn't ignore the possibility that someone, or something, needed attention. Peeking through the doorway, she saw an assortment of items: old tools, broken furniture, and what appeared to be stacks of papers and notebooks. One notebook in particular drew her attention. Its cover was worn, and the pages inside were filled with detailed notes about the ranch's operations, some of which seemed personal. For a moment, Clara hesitated. She knew she was crossing an invisible line by looking into the shed. These were private things, likely belonging to Miller, but her curiosity was stronger than her hesitation. Carefully, she examined the contents. Among the notes, she noticed entries that hinted at past mistakes Miller had made, decisions that had cost him money, and perhaps even the trust of other townspeople. There were also letters, some unopened, others partially read, that seemed to contain advice or guidance he had received during difficult times. Clara realized that Miller was not just a strict rancher. He was a man who had carried burdens silently, who had faced challenges alone, and who had made mistakes just like anyone else. There was a depth to him that no one in town seemed to understand. She felt a strange mix of sympathy and admiration. Here was a man who demanded much of others, yet perhaps he had demanded even more of himself. As she turned to leave, she heard a faint creak behind her. Panic surged through her chest. Had Miller noticed her? Had she crossed a line she shouldn't have? She froze, her heart hammering in her chest. Slowly, she stepped back toward the pasture, careful to avoid knocking over any objects that might reveal her presence. After a few tense moments, she realized no one was there. Still, the experience left her shaken. She understood that what she had discovered was sensitive and private. The temptation to tell someone, anyone, was strong, but she knew it would betray Miller's trust. She also realized that keeping the secret would require courage and discretion, qualities she hadn't had to use before. Returning to the pasture, she focused on the remaining tasks, trying to push the thoughts of the shed out of her mind. But the encounter had changed something inside her. She was no longer just performing physical labor. She was also learning to navigate the complexities of human character, trust, and responsibility. By late afternoon, the work in the northern pastures was nearly complete. Clara had repaired fences, cleared debris, and ensured the water supply was functional. She had also observed the land and animals closely, noting small issues that might need attention in the future. It had been a long, exhausting day, yet she felt a profound sense of accomplishment. When she returned to Miller, he was waiting near the office, his expression unreadable as always. "Back already?" he asked, his voice calm. Clara handed him her notes, carefully recording the work she had done. She didn't mention the shed or the notebooks. What she had seen was not hers to reveal. Miller scanned her notes, nodding slowly. "Good work," he said finally. "You paid attention to details others often miss." "That's important." Relief washed over Clara, but it was mixed with unease. The encounter in the shed lingered in her mind. She realized that she had stumbled upon a moral crossroads. She could reveal what she had seen, use it for advantage, or protect the trust of the man who had given her a chance. Each choice carried weight, and she felt the gravity of the decision pressing down on her. That evening, as she sat quietly by the small creek near the edge of the ranch, Clara reflected on the day. She thought about Miller, about the trust he had placed, knowingly or unknowingly, in her hands. She considered the temptation to act on what she had discovered, but deep down, she knew the right path was to respect his privacy. Trust, she realized, was not given lightly, and once broken, it could never be repaired. She also thought about herself. She had come to the ranch desperate for work, uncertain of her place in the world, and yet here she was, learning not just about ranch work but about human character, integrity, and responsibility. The experiences of the past few days had changed her. She felt stronger, wiser, and more aware of the complexities of life. As the sun set, casting long shadows across the fields, Clara made a quiet promise to herself. She would continue to work diligently, learn all she could, and honor the trust that had been placed in her. She would not betray Miller's confidence, even if it meant facing challenges she had not anticipated. The unthinkable, she realized, was not just in actions but in the choices one made in moments of moral uncertainty. When she returned to her small room that evening, Clara was physically exhausted, but her mind was alive with thought. She understood that tomorrow would bring new challenges and perhaps even more tests of character. But for the first time in a long while, she felt capable. She was not just surviving. She was learning, growing, and discovering what it meant to act with integrity even when no one was watching. And as she drifted to sleep, Clara knew that the events of this day, the discovery in the shed, the careful work in the northern pastures, and the quiet trust she had chosen to uphold, would stay with her forever. She had crossed a threshold, moving from simple survival to a deeper understanding of responsibility, human nature, and the true meaning of trust. The morning air was cool and crisp as Clara stepped onto the ranch once again. She had slept poorly the night before, her mind still replaying the events of the previous day, the discovery of the shed, the notebooks, and the letters. Though she had chosen to keep what she saw a secret, the weight of that decision pressed on her. Today felt different. She could sense it in the quiet rhythm of the ranch, in the way the sun filtered through the trees, and in the faint smell of earth and hay that seemed sharper than usual. As she approached the main barn, she saw Miller standing near the entrance, his arms folded, his gaze fixed on her arrival. There was something unusual in his posture, a slight tension that Clara had not seen before. He did not speak immediately, he simply watched her, his expression unreadable. "You're on time," he finally said, his voice calm but carrying a subtle edge. "Good. Today I have something important for you. It's not just work, it's a responsibility. Are you ready for that?" Clara's stomach tightened. She had faced hard labor, long hours, and moral dilemmas, but Miller's words suggested that today would test more than her strength or endurance. She nodded. "Yes, sir, I'm ready." Miller handed her a small envelope and gestured toward a section of the ranch she had not yet worked in. "This task requires precision, care, and honesty. You will complete the instructions inside this envelope exactly as they are written. Understand?" Clara opened the envelope carefully. Inside, she found detailed instructions for inspecting the livestock, checking fences, and documenting the condition of several barns that had been neglected. It seemed straightforward, yet the precision and honesty required made her heart race. One small mistake or overlooked detail could cause problems, and she knew that Miller would notice. She spent the morning moving from one barn to the next, carefully inspecting each animal, recording observations, and repairing minor damages. She paid attention to the smallest details, the way the water troughs were positioned, the gaps in fencing, and the health of each horse and cow. She noticed small injuries or illnesses among the animals and made notes on how they should be treated. Every action required focus, and every observation carried weight. Around midday, Clara paused to drink water under the shade of a large oak tree. She watched Miller from a distance, noting the way he moved through the ranch, speaking briefly with the other ranch hands, checking the operations with quiet authority. She had begun to understand him more deeply, the way he demanded excellence but also paid attention to the well-being of his land and animals. It was clear that he expected dedication and honesty not for his own pride, but for the survival and success of the ranch itself. After finishing the inspections and repairs, Clara returned to the office with her notes and the envelope. Miller was waiting, his expression calm but intense. He took the envelope from her and glanced through her records. "You've done well," he said finally. "Your attention to detail is impressive. Most people would have rushed through this and missed important observations. You did not." Clara felt a surge of pride, but she also sensed that there was more to come. Miller leaned forward slightly, his eyes locking onto hers. "There's one final part of today's task," he said. "It's a matter of trust." Clara's pulse quickened. She had encountered moral decisions before, but Miller's tone suggested that this was something deeper. He reached into his desk and pulled out a small, sealed box. "Inside this box," he said, "are items that are very important to me. They are personal, and they contain matters that only I should handle. I need to know if I can trust you." Clara's hands trembled slightly as he placed the box before her. She glanced at it, then back at Miller, unsure of what to say. "You may open it," he said, "but you must decide what to do with its contents afterward. This is the unthinkable part of today's task. You must choose. Will you respect my trust or will you act differently? Whatever you do will have consequences." Clara took a deep breath and opened the box carefully. Inside, she found letters, ledgers, and notes detailing sensitive matters, business decisions, personal correspondences, and records of challenges Miller had faced in the past. She realized that this information, if shared, could damage his reputation, harm his relationships, and create distrust among the people he worked with. Her mind raced. The temptation to look closer or share what she had found was strong, but she remembered the lessons she had learned over the past days, the value of patience, honesty, and integrity. She could feel the weight of the decision pressing on her. After a long moment, she made her choice. She carefully closed the box and handed it back to Miller without revealing anything. "I will respect your trust," she said quietly. "I won't share this with anyone. It stays with you." Miller studied her for a long moment. Then slowly he nodded. There was a faint smile on his lips, just enough to suggest approval. "That's the right choice," he said. "Most people would have been tempted to use this for themselves. You demonstrated integrity and understanding. That's more valuable than any labor or skill." Clara felt a wave of relief and gratitude. She had faced a test far greater than she had anticipated, one that went beyond physical labor or attention to detail. She had been entrusted with something deeply personal, and she had honored that trust. To her surprise, Miller reached into his desk once more and handed her a thicker envelope. "This is your payment for the day," he said. "Not just for the work you've done, but for the honesty and judgment you've shown. You've earned more than you expected, and more than most could earn in weeks." Clara opened the envelope to find a sum that far exceeded anything she had imagined. Her eyes widened in shock. I don't know what to say," she stammered. "You don't need to say anything," Miller replied. "Actions speak louder than words. Today you proved something important, not just your abilities but your character. That is what matters here." Clara felt a deep sense of accomplishment and respect. Miller's unthinkable action, the test of trust, had revealed not cruelty but insight. He had challenged her not just physically, but morally, giving her the chance to demonstrate the qualities that truly mattered. She realized that this moment was transformative. She had moved from simply working to being entrusted with responsibility, and in doing so, she had grown in ways she hadn't anticipated. As she left the office, the sun low in the sky, Clara reflected on the lessons of the day. Work could teach skills, endurance could build strength, but it was integrity, honesty, and understanding that defined a person. Miller had challenged her in ways that tested her inner self, and she had succeeded. The ranch was quiet as she walked along the path toward the pasture, the colors of sunset casting long shadows across the fields. Clara felt a mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. She had faced the unthinkable and come through stronger, more confident, and more aware of the depth of human character. By the time she reached her small room that evening, Clara was physically tired but mentally alert. She carefully placed the envelope in a safe spot, feeling the weight of both the payment and the lesson it represented. She understood that tomorrow would bring new challenges, but she also knew that she had proven herself capable of handling whatever came her way. As she lay down to rest, Clara felt a quiet sense of gratitude. She had come to the ranch seeking work, uncertain of her future and her place in the world. But through effort, observation, and the unthinkable test of trust, she had discovered something far more valuable than money or labor. She had discovered her own strength, her own judgment, and her ability to act with integrity even when no one was watching. And as the stars appeared in the night sky, shining over the vast expanse of the ranch, Clara understood that life on the ranch was about more than work. It was about growth, character, and the quiet, unspoken lessons that tested a person's heart and mind. She had faced the unthinkable and emerged stronger, ready to continue her journey with courage and determination. The morning sun rose over the ranch, casting a warm glow across the fields. Clara awoke with a sense of calm determination. The events of the previous days, the long hours, the physical work, and the moral challenges, had shaped her in ways she hadn't expected. Today, she knew, would be a day of reflection and perhaps the start of a new chapter in her life. As she stepped outside, she noticed the familiar sights of the ranch coming to life. Horses trotted lightly in the distance, cows moved slowly across the fields, and the soft murmur of the wind through the trees created a peaceful backdrop. Clara had grown to appreciate these moments, the quiet beauty that existed alongside the hard labor and strict rules of the ranch. Miller was already outside, examining a corner of the pasture where new fencing had been installed. When he noticed Clara approaching, he straightened and nodded slightly. There was a hint of approval in his gaze, a subtle acknowledgement of the work she had done and the trust she had earned. "You're early," he said. "Good. I want to talk to you about the future and about the work you've done so far." Clara felt a mix of curiosity and nervousness. She had learned to respect Miller's directness and honesty, and she knew that whatever he said would carry weight. She followed him to a quiet spot near the barn, away from the other ranch hands. "You've done well," Miller began, his tone steady but sincere. "You've shown dedication, attention to detail, and most importantly, integrity. Those are qualities that are hard to find and even harder to maintain under pressure." Clara felt a warmth in her chest. For weeks, she had struggled with doubt, uncertainty, and financial worries. To hear recognition from someone she respected was both comforting and motivating. Miller continued, "I want to offer you a permanent position on this ranch, not just as a worker, but as someone I can rely on for responsibility and judgment. You've proven that you can be trusted with more than labor. You can be trusted with important matters, and that's rare." Clara's eyes widened. She had not expected this. The opportunity was more than a paycheck or a temporary job. It was a chance to belong, to be valued, and to grow in a place that had initially seemed so intimidating. I don't know what to say," she stammered, her voice thick with emotion. "You don't need to say anything," Miller replied. "Actions will speak for themselves. Continue to work as you have, continue to show dedication and honesty, and you'll succeed here. You've already proven that you can handle challenges, and there will be more in the future." Clara nodded, feeling a sense of pride and purpose unlike anything she had experienced before. She realized that her journey was not just about earning money or surviving. It was about learning, growing, and becoming a person who could face life's challenges with courage and integrity. The rest of the day was filled with work, but it felt different to Clara now. She moved with confidence, handling tasks with skill and precision. She checked fences, tended to animals, and managed supplies, all while keeping an eye on the needs of the ranch and the details that might be overlooked by others. There was a rhythm to her work now, a harmony between effort and observation that made the labor feel purposeful rather than exhausting. Throughout the day, she reflected on the lessons she had learned. The first day had tested her determination. The second day had tested her endurance and observation. The third day had confronted her with a moral dilemma, and the fourth day had challenged her integrity. Each test had pushed her further, teaching her skills and values that she would carry with her for the rest of her life. By late afternoon, Clara had completed the day's tasks and returned to the office to report to Miller. He reviewed her notes and nodded approvingly. "You've done well today. Keep this up and the ranch will thrive, not just because of the land or the animals, but because of the people who care for them. And you, Clara, are one of those people." Clara felt a deep sense of fulfillment. She had started this journey desperate, uncertain, and fearful, and now she stood on the threshold of stability, respect, and opportunity. She realized that the true reward was not the money she had earned, but the growth she had achieved and the trust she had earned from Miller. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden light across the pastures, Clara walked along the fence line, observing the land she had worked so hard to care for. She thought about the journey that had brought her here, the long hours, the sweat, the moral decisions, and the lessons of patience and honesty. Each moment had shaped her, molding her into someone stronger, wiser, and more capable. That evening, after the ranch had quieted down, Clara sat by the small creek near her quarters. The water reflected the stars beginning to appear in the sky, twinkling like tiny lights against the darkness. She felt a sense of peace she had not known in a long time. The struggles that had weighed heavily on her now seemed like lessons rather than burdens. She understood that life was not just about surviving. It was about learning, growing, and making choices that defined character. Clara thought about the people in her life, friends who had offered support, strangers who had turned her away, and Miller, who had tested her in ways she had never imagined. She realized that challenges often came in disguise, and that sometimes the unthinkable was not cruelty, but a test of heart and mind. By facing those challenges, she had discovered her own strength and resilience. In the following weeks, Clara settled into her new role on the ranch. She continued to work diligently, earning not just wages but respect from Miller and the other ranch hands. She took on responsibilities that required judgment, observation, and care, and she excelled. Each day brought new lessons and opportunities to grow, and she embraced them with determination. She also began to understand the true meaning of trust. The secret she had discovered in the shed, the letters, and the notebooks had remained hers alone. She realized that respecting someone's confidence was more valuable than any reward she could gain from sharing it. That choice had defined her character and earned her the unspoken respect of Miller, who now relied on her not just for work, but for judgment and integrity. Clara's life had changed in ways she could never have imagined. The ranch, which had once seemed daunting and overwhelming, had become a place of purpose, growth, and opportunity. She had come seeking work and survival, but she had found something much greater: confidence, self-respect, and a sense of belonging. As she looked out over the rolling fields, the animals grazing peacefully and the barn standing strong, Clara felt a quiet sense of triumph. She had faced physical challenges, moral dilemmas, and tests of character, and she had emerged stronger and wiser. The lessons she had learned on the ranch were not just about labor. They were about life, integrity, and the power of making choices that reflected one's values. And as night fell over the ranch, Clara felt a profound sense of hope for the future. She understood that challenges would continue to come, but she was no longer the uncertain, desperate woman who had arrived days ago. She had proven her strength, her judgment, and her integrity, and she knew that she could face whatever life presented. The ranch was more than a place of work. It was a place of growth, a place where character was tested, and where lessons were learned through effort, observation, and trust. Clara had embraced these lessons fully, and in doing so, she had discovered her own resilience and capacity for integrity. As she drifted off to sleep that night, she felt a deep sense of gratitude. The unthinkable challenge she had faced, the test of trust from Miller, had become a turning point in her life. She had earned not just respect, but the knowledge that she could face difficult choices with courage and honor. For Clara, the ranch was no longer just a job. It was a home, a place of purpose, and a school for life's most important lessons. She had grown through struggle, learned through observation, and strengthened through trust. And in the quiet of the night, with the stars shining above and the land she had come to care for stretching out before her, Clara felt ready for anything that the future might hold. Her journey had begun with desperation, continued through effort and moral challenge, and now led to hope, purpose, and a sense of belonging. The lessons she had learned would stay with her forever, guiding her in life, work, and the choices that defined who she was. Clara had not only survived, she had grown, thrived, and discovered the power of integrity, trust, and perseverance.